Hello everyone, this is Kansai Dorito, and since the last time I've looked at all the dolls in the game, quite a bit has changed. The introduction of gold chips, new characters, gold keys, frenzy mode, and even new modes in general to pit our girls against. So what I've decided to do is take each girl, weigh their strengths, weaknesses, roles, niches, and obtainability, and assign a point system to determine their overall usefulness to an account, from V0 to V6. Then I will use the average of the 6 scores to calculate the overall effectiveness of a doll, and put them in this tier list based on how they scored compared to one another. Just a couple disclaimers though before we begin. The first one is, I'm on global, so I'm rating the dolls as they are now, with no consideration for how they'll end up by the time we catch up to CN. Secondly, this list is just my opinion, and while I try to be as factual and unbiased as possible, at the end of the day, I'm still a human. And confirmation bias will inadvertently play into how I perceive and place dolls. Just because I place a doll low doesn't mean she's not good. Alright, now that we've got all this boring shit out of the way, let's talk about Uma Musume Pretty Derby. As many of you may know, this game is fucking peak, and the horses are the best part of it, which is why I am excited to announce that Gacha is dropping some Uma-inspired merch based on your favorite girls. This time around, we've got 3 awesome shirts to keep you looking fresh at your favorite horse gambling events, with a Haru, Daiwa Scarlet, and Rice Shower shirt all available right now at gachaloha.com. Use the link in the description to pop in quickly and use code Kansai to get a little off the top, and help support me and Palm, the one-man show in charge of it all. Thanks. Now, let's get right into that tier list. To start, let's spin the wheel of girls that have caused issues with the girls filing community and are available to obtain on global. Oh, that's a smaller wheel than I was expecting. Fuck it, let's spin it. And Klukai. Alright. First up is all you need herself. One of, if not the strongest characters available in the game currently. From V0 to V6, Klukai absolutely shits on 99% of the game's content. PvP, MSQ, expansion drills, nothing can even hold a candle to just how absolutely oppressive her AoE and movement are. V3 onwards, her sole weakness against bosses disappears, and she becomes the avatar, master of shitting on all content. She benefits greatly with follow-up teams. Her perma-ult strategy only requires 1 unit to make work, so she can very easily be mixed in with other teams, like the ever-popular Hydro Corrosion team. Overall, from V0 to V6, Klukai is absolutely top tier, with the only real hit to her invisible score being her struggle with bosses at lower dupes, really wanting her SSR gun, and being a limited banner unit, meaning you either got to save and pray or bust open wallet chant to get her to those later dupes. With all that, I'm just gonna drop Klukai in S tier. Now, as a character I've wanted to cover for a long time, Springfield, who is drop-dead gorgeous, carries one of the greatest rifles in the history of the world, and is in my opinion the only other doll in competition for the best in the game, which is even more exceptional when you realize she's a support. Springfield's heals are hands down the best in the game, turning your entire party into a bunch of unkillable tanks, and this is straight out of the box, regardless of team comps, making Springfield useful against 100% of the game's content. Even if your team is fine without the heal, Springfield has some great buffs and even decent damage to bring along, especially on Hydro-focused teams, and at V6 becomes a bona fide DPS herself, absolutely destroying any and all targets. Not to mention her incredible synergy with Tololo, a powerful standard unit that's easily available. Springfield's only real downside is being a limited banner unit, and not really having a great alternative to her SSR weapon, so she's easily gonna land in the S tier. Picking up Tololo, we've got a girl who went from fucking 0 to hero. Seriously. Oh, maybe not. She wasn't bad before, but getting her best buddy for life, Springfield, and her mod key in the same patch made her basically unfucking recognizable. Tololo before took her extra turn once every couple of turns. With the release of her mod key, she's getting it every turn, and at V2, when combined with support from a V1 Springfield, she can get off 3 full actions before her turn ends, giving her insane mobility and damage to make her not only viable, pretty damn good on all the game's content, including bosses. Since she only really needs Springfield to work at peak capacity, Tololo works great on full Hydro or hybrid teams, making her super versatile in the team path as well. What makes all of her strengths so baffling is how easy to obtain she is, since Tololo is a standard SSR unit, and chances are you've lost a 50-50 to her trying to get someone else or targeting her on the standard banner. On top of being easy to obtain, she can use most of the rifles in the game to great extent, and her best in slot is also a standard banner rifle, Planeta, which most players are bound to get at some point, and with how good she is now, she definitely earns it. With her lack of weaknesses, incredible strength, and incredible versatility, Tololo's earned her spot on the S tier. Next is Sharkree, who, all biases aside, retains her crown as the best bang-for-buck unit in the game. Sharkree is an SR unit, meaning even the freest of free-to-plays are gonna get her to V6 easily, and those that do are rewarded, not only with the best-looking, sweetest, most adorably perfect girl in the history of fiction, but with an absolute fucking freight train that smashes absolutely everything better than all but the stinkiest basement-dwelling whales V6 limited units. Your Shark's gonna top your damage charts, and no other SR in the game even compares, with basically any rifle you give her. Sharkree definitely needs a team to get the most out of her though, since overburn applications don't grow on trees, so dolls like Chongjo and Vector are basically necessary if you want to get the absolute most out of her. That doesn't mean she can't lay it down on her own. Sharkree is not limited at all by any content and has good enough mix of both range and mobility that she can exert her will basically wherever she wants. If Sharkree was a limited 5-star, she would still be fucking S tier, but being such a strong unit available to literally everyone, she should get a tier all to herself. But we're just gonna settle for S tier. Alright, to keep things fresh, we're gonna ask chat to pick the next doll, so let's see. Okay, Colphne it is. Colphne has the unfortunate predicament of being a healer in the same universe as Springfield, but because Springfield is a premium unit, Colphne still has her niche of a heavy free-to-play healer. While that's mostly a downside, it lets Colphne fit in anywhere, and if you're an early player picking up the game, having a doll you can rely on for great healing is awesome. The downside is, Colphne doesn't really do much damage, or bring much support outside of healing, so for content where a healer isn't necessary, which, let's be real, is most content, it's hard to justify bringing Colphne along. Despite this, Colphne's gonna do her best until you outgrow her, and even then, she'll still be there for you. Sadly, because of her overall lack of strength, I have no choice but to put her all the way down in S tier. Now on to Beverly, who in my opinion is the most underrated doll in the game. In non-boss content, Beverly is great. She's an awesome high mobility unit with great AoE and single target damage. In boss content, she can keep a constant 20% vuln and a constant stream of cleanses on a boss, which while not the best option by any means can make Beverly worthwhile to bring when you've got a hyper carry, a team that lacks cleanses, or just don't have a full team and need that last flex slot filled. Because her cleanses and vuln don't have a damage condition, Beverly is serviceable right out of the box, so the free one all players get is enough to get the best traits out of her, same with the weapons. The difference between her V0 and V6 is a night and day like it is on, say, Tololo, so you don't really have to bother with getting dupes, which is another major plus, unless you lose a bunch of 50/50s to her. With all that considered, I think Beverly brings a lot of great value to any account, and definitely earns a spot in the S tier. Now let's move on to Qiuhua, or Captain China, who hasn't been out long by this point but has absolutely made an impression. She's a high mobility AoE unit like Beverly, and like Beverly, she is one hell of a roamer for non-boss content, destroying the field with complete ease. Where they differ is that Qiuhua blows Beverly's damage completely out of the water, so much so that she's currently the best fire DPS in the game. Which, I mean, you'd fucking hope she was if you got her all the way to V6. Sharkree stays hot on her fucking tail though, my girl ain't a quitter. And like Sharkree, Qiuhua also needs allies to proc overburn to get the most out of her, so ideally you'll run her with other burn units. Like Klukai, she really wants dupes if you're gonna use her against bosses, since a lot of her damage is locked behind them. The availability is definitely gonna hurt if you're free to play, but I mean, just borrow her, dummy. Qiuhua's unapologetic damage definitely makes up for any shortcomings she might have, what little they are, so she's gonna spice up the S tier. Speaking of spicing things up, let's take a look at Vector, who is currently the best burn support in the game, and if I'm being honest, there's no competition. Burn currently is very heavy on follow-ups and targeted damage, and Vector is purpose-built to help with both. On top of this, she deals some solid damage herself, and even a bit of utility, with a team-wide cleanse tied to her ult at V2. While this may make you assume she'll lack viability in non-boss content because of her support-oriented role, you'd be dead wrong, since Vector has a huge fucking map-wide napalm strike, great movement, and just enough damage to drop enemies on her own. The only drawbacks are small, the main one being that she really wants her first and second dupe to get her whole deck of cards, which, because she's a limited unit, can be easier said than done. Especially since Vector isn't a character you'd normally borrow, because she can't carry a team on her own. She also doesn't really fit anywhere outside of the burn team since she doesn't bring anything to the table for non-burn units. Like I said, these two little tidbits are absolutely trumped by the power Vector brings to any account, and I can't recommend getting anyone more if you're looking to get a burn team off the ground, so I'm gonna drop Vector in the S tier. Nikita is the newest girl in the game, and she's definitely got that new girl strength. Even at V0, Nikita lays down some serious damage and stability damage to single targets, regardless of who her allies are, letting Nikita slot in basically anywhere you could possibly need her. Bringing the Springfield along is definitely ideal though. Her great range lets her stay relevant in non-boss content too, but it's clearly not what she was made for. Nikita's also got a unique position of having a standard banner weapon that's better than her Sig, since after testing, a Samusek will actually squeeze more damage out of her, making her easier to get great value out of with limited pulls, which is always appreciated. Nikita's definitely got her role, and she fills it extremely well without asking for too much, so she's going to sit comfortably in the S tier. Moving further down the thermometer, we're going to quickly cover Suomi, since her guide is coming soon. Right out of the box, Suomi is the best shielder in the game, bringing shields so large and so constant they make your team borderline unkillable in the same way Springfield does. Where Suomi and Springy differ is Suomi lacks basically all the offensive capabilities Springfield has, even at V6, which is a damn shame. Suomi can, however, bring some decent offensive buffs to a team, in the form of her V2 and her signature weapon, which unfortunately require you to invest pretty heavily into your Suomi. Luckily, past that point, Suomi can do it all, bringing a great amount of offensive support, defensive support, and even some great stability damage to other ice units, which is who she's ideally paired with. Her defensive skills don't discriminate though, and trivialize all of the game's content, from the very start of the game to the hardest of the endgame. While definitely not the strongest in the game, Suomi has remained a great and relevant unit from the very first day of the game's launch, and in my opinion, gets to settle in a comfy spot at the S tier. On the other end of the support spectrum, we've got Cheeta, who's a super versatile offensive support. Her versatility, though, comes from her ultimate, which is an attack buff and 3 random buffs on top of it, those random buffs being simultaneously Cheeta's greatest strength and greatest weakness. In the most ideal circumstances, she can give your entire team exactly the buffs they want, which on teams like Corrosive, which don't have a full roster, or Freeze, which is in dire need of offensive support units, is absolutely incredible. Or, on the flip side, give 3 defensive buffs and contribute nothing to your team's offense. It's not all inconsistent though. Cheeta's also a great healer, she just struggles with stability healing. Luckily, Cheeta's an SR unit, and thus is extremely easy to V6, and because her buffs come from her base kit, a good weapon and attachments aren't even entirely necessary. Add on some cool strategies with her nodes and common keys and you've got a great unit, definitely worthy of the S tier. While we're on the SMGs, let's look at Papasha, a DPS who deals some great damage despite being part of the currently worst damage type in the game, physical. Papasha's solid damage comes from her great self buff, solid multipliers, and her mech, giving her some serious punch to boss type enemies. With the release of Qiuhua and her over-penetration mechanic, Papasha is only trending upwards, and as more and more dupes of both her and her signature weapon become earnable via the platoon shop, Papasha is a great addition that requires no sacrifice of resources to max, which is totally awesome. Compared to other units, Papasha may not be the strongest, but having a 5th or 6th man on the field can be a benefit in and of itself, triggering party-sized thresholds for certain boss mechanics or just spreading out damage. Considering what she brings and what she costs, I think Papasha is worth your time and lands square in the S tier. Considering I mentioned her, let's talk about Qiuhua, who single-handedly took the struggling physical damage team and made it competent on the back of her defense shredding, crit boost, stability damage boost she brings. Qiuhua isn't just offense though, she's got the ability to keep a whole team alive with her heals and defensive buffs. Qiuhua herself also has some solid damage, especially at V6, where she can easily be your physical team's biggest damage dealer on top of everything else she brings. Qiuhua is a bit more complex than your more standard units though, especially at V0, so getting a good grasp of what you're doing is definitely necessary, and a lack of truly exceptional physical DPS units on global means we might have to wait a bit just to see how strong Qiuhua and her buffs look like on someone who actually lays it down hard. Luckily, with dupes, Qiuhua isn't limited to just physical teams, making her a great general support if you've got the bucks. Overall, Qiuhua is an incredible unit who might need a bit more effort than the other girls to truly shine, but when you give it to her, she definitely will. That's why she's gonna shine like a star at the S tier. Nagant is unfortunately in a very bad state. While she was solid and even good in the early game, the end game and the type of content it brings has been very cruel to her dear granny. While she has some half-decent debuffs she can apply, she's got basically nothing else going for her. Since handguns don't have an exceptional pistol for her, her element doesn't really do anything for her, her damage is middling, and she lacks any real utility. What little utility she does have comes in the form of her stunning capability, which was expanded upon with her mod key, but even then, everything worth getting stunned is just immune to it. She does have some pretty fun uses in PvP though, since most dolls are still vulnerable to stunts, and her ability to punish dolls for simply moving leads to some great outcomes when paired with the right support. Unfortunately, even with that, using Nagant is just getting harder and harder to justify, which is why it is with a heavy heart that I have to lay her down in the S tier. While we're on one Nagant, we might as well cover the other one. Mosin is still the only electric unit in the game. When I made my Mosin guide in December, I made a joke about it. At this point, it isn't funny. It's cruel how long Mosin has existed in the game without proper support. Luckily, we're getting 3 electric units back to back, so that pain will meet its end soon. Mosin, though, is a single target sub DPS, and while she can be good, she's not really gonna hold a candle to any of the premier DPS units in the game. A dedicated team she can properly build with, her full potential is still locked, but even without it, teams with heavy stability damage greatly benefit Mosin, especially at V3. Before that, Mosin can feel extremely underwhelming, especially with her paralysis mechanic, which, just like Granny, most enemies just fucking ignore. Luckily, Mosin is a standard SSR, so while directly investing in her is an option, chances are you're gonna catch a dupe or two every so often by pulling on other characters. Her main downside is her lack of effectiveness in non-boss content, at least compared to other dolls, which unfortunately isn't really made up for by her above-average single-target damage. Despite this, I personally use Mosin often, and when specialized dolls aren't available, she's my first choice for damage, but that's a personal bias. So, to be a bit more fair, I'm gonna make a preemptive compromise with where I think the general community puts her and get her in the S tier. Speaking of disagreements with the community, let's talk about Pari, who's one of my favorite dolls in the game. Pari's a tank who puts out a solid amount of damage in the form of her multiple basic attacks, which she easily uses to either take out a bunch of trash mobs or get focus fire from follow-up dolls like Qiuhua, since each of her attacks gets a proc. While that tankiness is often wasted when you're doing max finish expansion drills with a burn team, having a doll that can take a beating so your other dolls don't pop like grapes is a godsend, especially because burn lacks a Springfield tier healer. This keeps Pari useful from the early game to the late game, and despite releasing this to Springfield, I don't really regret getting her for a second. Still, she's no first seed pick though, so unfortunately the highest I could reasonably put her is S tier. Xiaou is a doll I personally really like too, but I can honestly say she's not the best. Xiaou's got some incredible movement she can actually share with her team at V2 in the form of her Rise ult style team-wide teleport, which is fucking hilarious. It can give a serious kick in the ass to your more immobile units. Unfortunately, as cool as this is, it's not all that useful, and Xiaou's very lacking damage doesn't make things any better for her. For how stacked the now large and in-charge Hydro team is, Xiaou is definitely the duckling at the back of the line, and being a limited banner unit makes it even worse. I'm sure with some more damage, she'll be a great niche unit, but as it stands, I don't think she deserves any higher than S tier. Speaking of the large and in-charge Hydro team, let's cover Sabrina, who despite being a tank, still maintains relevance in the evolving global GFL2 meta. Sabrina is a solid pick for basically all content, with her oppressively large AoEs and cover destruction making her great for non-boss content, her counterattacks, buffs, and debuffs keeping her strong against normal and frenzy bosses, and her taunt and stability buffs keeping her relevant in PvP. While in the past she was definitely more defined in her tank role, her mod key pushes her into the realm of DPS dolls, and a quick rebuild of mine and some Springfield support let her put out some nasty numbers. And on her ability to use any weapon you give her, and being V6able for free because of the weekly boss fight, and Sabrina is extremely worth your time. She'll take what you give her and spit out results, and for that, I can't think of anywhere but S tier. While we're on the shotguns, Lada was at one point considered to be the straight upgrade to Beverly, and to you Reddit tards that said that, I bet you feel really fucking stupid right now. Lada is an AoE unit who has definitely seen better days. While her AoE damage is respectable in non-boss content, the release of characters like Klukai and Qiuhua have all but obsoleted her, and without much else to bring in terms of utility, the lack of single target damage hurts her even more, since her only true place to shine has no place for her. Add on that anyone who started playing after the first event can't even get her without sacrificing more pulls than she's honestly worth, and it's hard to justify taking her off the bench for anything other than how cute she is. It's a shame to see characters that sacrifice everything for their niche get power crept in it, but the reality is what it is, so Lada's gonna go down to the deepest pits of the S tier. Centaurace is another doll who's definitely seen better days. While her healing is amazing and her damage is great compared to a lot of her healing contemporaries, Springfield really redefined what is expected of a healer, and unfortunately, that recontextualizes Cent. That being said, Cent has a full team map-wide cleanse that she can pop often due to her mod key, some overburn applications, and at V1, some solid offensive support capabilities. With the right common keys, you can even turn her into a pseudo-Cheeta, applying random buffs to allies. Like I said before, Cent does fall behind other defense units like Suomi and Springfield, her healing being potent but not preemptive, and while her mod key can keep your team invincible from stray hits, and quite often at that, it's still not as good as being basically invincible all the time. With these small gripes aside, Cent is an incredible asset to the burn team, is easy to build, and can use a variety of ARs very effectively, and for that, she's gonna tidy up the S tier. Krill is another example of a solid early game unit absolutely butchered by the passage of time. As more and more units come out, Krill's use on the Stack to the 9's burn team is basically unjustifiable. While she's great at applying overburn, she lags behind most of the alternatives. Her damage is low, even with a perfect build. Her peak key doesn't do much for her, and even her movement is lagging behind the all-new Qiuhua. Blades as a whole have unfortunately been left in the dust, and being the weaker of the two is extremely unfortunate. the worst part of all of this is I like Krill. She's cute, fun to play, and takes actual thought and strategy to do well with, but her shortcomings cannot be overlooked, so she's gonna have to be banished to the S tier. While we're on the sword users, let's cover Obert, who in my opinion is the most fun to play doll in the game. Post-mod key Obert has some sauce in the form of her 6 attacks on turn 1 at V0, her stealth and some solid damage to boot. Her movement is also pretty great since her mod key gives her resets pretty often and her skills give her some solid extra movement. In combination with her stealth, Obert is an incredible unit for objective-based maps and isn't unplayably terrible for bosses, especially with the Qiuhua on board. But unfortunately, her damage isn't incredible, and while her dupes help, she's still got damage comparable to the 3 Papasha. But she's a limited unit who actually requires your limited pull resources. Obert is an incredibly fun character, but she's definitely a product of this game's early gameplay balance, and thus cannot be justifiably placed anywhere but the S tier. Mechi is awesome. She's got a job to do, and does it perfectly. As the game's only current corrosive support, Mechi gives some seriously great buffs and debuffs to her element, and given how strong corrosive is because of Klukai, means that her great support has some solid weight behind it to make it even more worthwhile. Her personal damage is a bit low, the percentage-based nature of her kit and stability damage increases means she contributes a ton, even when you build her absolutely horribly, which is totally awesome. Her buffs also have infinite range, meaning if your sleepo blows sticks, you can park her ass in the corner and let her take a nap while her allies take advantage of her basically passive contributions. Considering the only other corrosion support in the game is Granny, who risks a lot more and provides a lot less, and Mechi contributing a fuck ton to corrosion teams at V0, and it's hard to overlook her, even if your resources are limited. To keep everything short, Mechi is S tier. Speaking of great supports, Cassennia is, in my opinion, the greatest middle ground between universal healer and buffer in the game if you're not willing to put up with Cheeta's RNG. And yes, you heard me right, universal. While in the past, I've only really talked about her contributions to the burn team, which is definitely where she shines the brightest, Blazing Assault, her main buff, isn't just for the burn team. 15% attack boost is awesome on your well-built units, and outside of the burn team won't be made redundant with other Blazing Assault applications. This, combined with her solid healing output, means that you can put her into any comp, which is nice because sometimes going all in on a healer is leaving too much damage on the table, and not running one means your whole team's gonna die. Add in the fact she's a 4-star who doesn't even need good equipment to operate, and you've got some incredible bang for buck, and an easy S tier. Lara is a character who, like Lada, was absolutely butchered by the evolving AoE meta. Despite having an AoE vuln and shred in her kit, basically every AoE character on the higher end simply has enough damage right off the rip to absolutely destroy non-elite, non-boss enemies, and thus Lara's niche of mass debuffs is no longer useful. Despite her niche sucking, she does it very well, with giant AoEs with good uptime, solid damage, and some great cover disruption. If trash mobs ever get stronger, Lara may once again become very relevant, but as it stands now, I cannot in good faith place her any higher than S tier. Chongjo is a unit that needs no introduction. You know she's strong, I know she's strong, and her mod key made her only better. Chongjo excels in all content, in basically any team comp that can facilitate her action supports, and with the burn team, is elevated to an even better DPS, with Vector specifically giving her a massive spike in damage. Overall, QJ is the glue that holds the burn team together, and because she's a standard unit, she's available to everyone. She's awesome. S tier. Next on the standard unit list is Faye, our newest standard unit, who I think is solid, but largely held back by her element, or, well, lack thereof. Faye is the only physical focused debuffer in the game, and her debuff, Rend, is a very nice 30% increase to all physical damage an enemy takes. Faye's ability to apply this shit right out of the box very consistently would normally make her a solid pick. Unfortunately, physical damage as a whole kinda sucks right now. And like I said with Qiuhua, no one really exists right now that really justifies bringing someone this specialized along for this damage type. Besides that debuff though, Faye's got some nice damage, some cool animations, a beautiful pistol, and is cute as hell. However, due to her real lack of dolls to support, it's hard to justify going out of your way to get her right now. So until that justification comes along, I can't place her anywhere but S tier. Now, let's finish up the standard elite dolls with Paritia, who in my opinion has always been great. Pre-Klukai, she was a staple on AoE teams, which were and still are the best way to clear non-boss content. With the release of Klukai, the ideal AoE teams were quickly replaced by Klukai and her redefinition of what AoE could be. Dolls like Lada and Lara got left in the dust, but Paritia didn't. She evolved, but not for any changes made to her. Her kit has always been the same, not even a mod key. Mika pretty successfully recontextualized her kit, turning her into a sub-DPS and an incredible support for Klukai, enabling her most powerful strategy with her AoE support attacks. Tack on a Mechi to turn those corrosive, and now you've got an incredible team capable of handling all the game's content. Being a standard unit, she's easy to obtain at your leisure, and has the ace of being obtained with the dispatch coins, which, while luck-based, is still nice to have and costs nothing. Paritia has been awesome this entire time, and it brings me a lot of joy that she's managed to maintain relevance for Global's entire life thus far. Easy S tier. Finishing up the corrosive cast, we have Nemesis, a defense-shredding sub-DPS who, compared to a lot of the cast released since launch, lacks heavily in both, the main upside being Nemesis' range, which allows her to do both safer than some of the other dolls, which can be pretty useful if the situation calls for it. Apart from that though, Nemesis doesn't really bring much value when directly compared to most of the alternatives. That being said, she's great in the early game, where she'll more than likely be your best damage dealer through it, and is completely free to obtain and build, so having her doesn't deprive you of anyone else. Even though she doesn't remain good forever, she's still got something to contribute, so she's gonna get placed in a very respectable S tier. Diane is one of my favorite dolls in the game if we're just considering gameplay. She's got absolutely insane movement, some great ramping damage, a fucking brutal interception, and an on-demand cleanse. All of these combined make Diane an amazing pick for all of the game's content, since her great movement lets her maneuver on objective maps that same movement, and the ability to deal 2 damage types and intercept lets her handle all non-boss maps, and her cleanse and damage ramp keep her relevant as a solid utility sub-DPS in boss content. For a newer player, I couldn't recommend anyone more, when she comes around that is, fucking limited mana units. Either way, she's going in Raymond tier, S tier. It's been a while, so let's finally get to another ice unit and talk about Deshevne. Dush is an honestly solid buff unit for an element that has unfortunately seen better days. While ice was the best there was in the early days, it has been butchered by the strong showings of the corrosive, burn, and now hydro teams. While this definitely helps contextualize why Dush isn't the strongest, her numbers themselves aren't great either. She passively buffs her entire team's damage by 10%, which is cool, with another 10% for freeze units, which is also cool, but less useful with the current state of ice. Out of the box, her ult only gives another 10% for one single attack, which honestly blows, and that's just about it at a base level. She can cleanse with the key and deal some solid stability damage, but without a strong team to support, this is super underwhelming. Her dupes make her better, her V1 giving her some utility in the form of a random quote-unquote powerful buff and 2 tires of movement on an ult, and her holy shit V6 giving her vulnerable too, and doubling the passive damage boosts. But overall, it's hard to justify going that far for Dush, as much as I enjoy using her, so unfortunately Dush is going to go in the S tier. Next, to wrap up Freeze as a whole, we have Maki, which despite being the strongest member of the Ice team, does incredibly well without them. Maki is the most self-sufficient unit in the game, providing herself protection in the form of her ult shield, cover in the form of her interceptions, and consistent high damage with her skills, and absolutely shines in literally all content right out of the box. Just because she does well on her own though doesn't mean she can't also be a huge asset to a team. Because of the nature of her interceptions and long-ass range, she can easily cover flanking units, trigger allied action supports, and takes basically any buff you give her in stride, and that's at a base level. At V1 she gets a massive damage boost, and at V6 she's a fucking beast, but that's not necessary in the slightest. Maki's got a lot going for her, and is one of the best units in the game. Easy S tier. And last but not least, the canon wife Groza. Now look, I love Groza. She's a fun unit that does a bit of everything except healing, but man, she's got it rough. Groza does some decent damage, has a decent attack buff, some AoE, a single target, and her biggest contribution though is tankiness. She's a tank herself and gives allies some extra survivability with her buffs. Now, in the very early game, when you really don't know what you're doing, this can be useful since dying is a thing that can actually happen, but in the mid and especially the late game, defensive play is almost completely dumped in favor of offense. Despite this, Groza can still slot into literally any team and do what she does, and being the first unit you obtain, she'll keep you safe in the early game. Take any attachment, any weapon, any stats or keys you give her, and be grateful. She may not be it to you, but to me, she's S tier. Alright, that wraps up the tier list. Where did your favorite girl land? Did she deserve another tier? Let me know what you think in the comments so I can tell you why you're wrong. And while you're at it, pick up a shirt or two from Gacha. My man Palm works his ass off to bring you guys great shirts and cares so much about the product you guys receives. And remember to use code KANSAI to save a couple bucks and let him know who sent you. Oh, and I wanted to thank you for watching, for sticking around. I know a lot of you guys quit GFL too, and despite that came to watch this. That gesture isn't lost on me. And I wanted you to know that I appreciate it, personally. I really don't deserve how great you guys are. Sorry for getting all weird and gooey. Either way, thanks again for watching, and I hope you stay strapped.